It's me, the mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart. Hey, check out my new tag team, baby, Monty and the Pharaoh.
Hey, Jimmy, don't forget to tell them about Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast.
Well, you know what, I would, but you already did it.
It's Monty and the Pharaoh.
The Monty and Pharaoh Show.
Monty and Pharaoh, bro.
Monty and the Pharaoh. The Monty and the Pharaoh.
You've got the future Hall of Famers at Rucker, Marty Jannetty, MJ in the house, and I'm sitting here with two more future Hall of Famers, Monty and the Pharaoh. We're doing that stuff and we gonna rock it.
Monty and the Pharaoh.
It's Monty and the Pharaoh.
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 And Monty and the Pharaoh. Oh, is it Monty and the Pharaoh?
Monty and the Pharaoh.
Monty and the Pharaoh.
Hey, cut music. When you want the best in professional wrestling, Long Island, there's only one place you're gonna get it, right here.
Monty and the Pharaoh. Now, that's not just the coolest, and that's not just the best. That, my friends, is just incredible.
Monty and the Pharaoh. Duh.
I'm having one fun with Monty and the Pharaoh, and I'm gonna put him in a crossface again, and he's gonna go down right now. Yeah.
Hey! Not get it called off the Russian Nightmare. And you're watching the #1 show on Long Island with Monty and the Pharaoh.
New Age Outlaws.
There we go. There we go. That's one of the great all-time teams. Yet, and if you're not down with that, they've got 2 words for you.
All right, welcome back to Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monty and the Pharaoh, only seen here out of Indie Music TV. And today's special Saturday show is about the history of the WWE tag team titles, WWF tag team titles, WWF tag team titles. We're saying it's all the same. We did have a show a couple of months ago, the history of the Intercontinental title, which was a fantastic show.
That was a blast.
This one seemed to be a little more difficult.
Yeah, it was. Folks, this title was created technically on June 3rd, 1971. So, of course, we are now celebrating 50 years of this belt. It has undergone a billion title changes. I think what made it harder for us is that the fact that the tag team belts, you think other belts get passed around like hotcakes? The tag team titles get passed around even more than any other belt as far as the total amount of champions and the total count and what we had to decipher through to figure out where we were going to go with all of this. Tag team wrestling, as I said, evolved over the years. It became much more hotcake situation in the Attitude Era, as we'll get to a little bit later.
Absolutely.
But Mike, over the years, there's been some pretty amazing tag team specialists of sorts. You gotta.
Before we go to what we feel are the history a little bit, I want to give some recognition.
Yeah.
Mr. Fuji held the tag team titles 5 times.
Right.
For a total of 932 days.
Mr. Fuji, to me, is the probably early pioneer, along with another team we'll get to. I don't want to start giving everything away, but he was a rock for tag team wrestling in the WWF and then the WWF in the 70s and into the mid-80s. Mr. Fuji was amazing. Who's next?
You've got Billy Gunn holding the title 10 times for 916 days.
Yeah.
Now, we got to understand something,
Yeah.
right? The 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
The game changed. We had the same problem with the Intercontinental title,
Sure,
right?
the game changed.
Guys
sure.
held it for a longer time, which
Right.
I enjoyed much better.
Right.
Actually.
Right.
So things do get skewed.
I'll tell you, though, it is comforting to see an old-school legend like Mr. Fuji. Sure, it spells out that he had 5 reigns in 932 days, and it spells out the way tag team belts would change all the time in the Attitude Era. To comparing Fuji's 5 reigns, 932, to Billy Gunn's 10 reigns, I am relieved to see that Billy Gunn had 916 days.
Right.
So it doesn't mean that.
And again, both
you know,
superior tag team specialists within the
absolutely.
WWF or E, right?
Who do we have at 3 and 4? I think we could pair these up for Matty
You've got
to throw up there.
Axe and Smash.
There you go. Good
They've
old
held the belt
Demolition.
3 times for 398
Actually,
days.
698
698 days, yeah.
You got to throw the other 300 days on there. You know, or is it 350 days? No,
No, that's terrible.
300's better. Okay.
And then after that, you've got Tony Gurria.
How about Johnny Valiant? We skipped Johnny
Oh,
Valiant.
you got John. Well, I purposely skipped Johnny Valiant.
Oh, yeah.
2 times for
Well,
600
what's your
days.
problem with Johnny Valiant? You thought he was a girl the first time you looked at him.
Well, we'll get into that, but
Yeah.
that's you know, I'm
There
just
you
not
go.
a big fan.
Yeah.
Not a
Tony-
big fan of him or his friends.
Tony, oh my God! Oh boy, you're like school on Christmas vacation. Now class. All right, Tony Gurria. How about that? We got that one up there. Tony Gurria.
So Tony Gurria,
You know.
very important for me, right?
Sure,
Because that's
for
when
me
I first
too.
started getting into wrestling.
Sure.
Tony Gurria, Rick Martel, big deal.
I remember him
right?
with Zbyszko being champions, world champions.
So, I mean, look, man, the list goes on and on and on. But I think it's important if we're going to discuss the history of the WWE tag team titles,
Right.
we should start off in the 70s, Jimmy. Go ahead.
All right. Well, during the 1970s, you can really look at 2 specific teams, in my opinion. Professor Toro Tanaka and Mr. Fuji, who held the belts, I think, 3 times over that time period during the 70s, and it was spaced out over several years. And you've got the Valiants. And the Valiants, to me, were pre-Freebird, if you will.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? They were that. They were a sexy name. They were like something I heard other people, like adults, talking about. When they would talk about wrestling, I would hear about the Valiants. So the Valiants clearly had an it factor going on back then.
80s tag team wrestling. I think that's when maybe tag team wrestling came into its own.
Yeah. It's definitely when it joined the big time show. For
Yes.
sure.
Uh-huh.
In the first half of the 80s, it was the warm-up to the big-time show. And yes, I'm alluding to WrestleMania and all that followed after WrestleMania.
Sure.
But the teams, to me, that carried the first half of the decade are, here's Mr. Fuji again with Mr. Saito.
Right.
Absolutely. Also, can we please mention Captain Lou Albano? Please.
Absolutely.
We're talking tag teams here. Captain
Yeah.
Lou Albano, the manager of champions, the manager of tag team champions. Oh, my God. He had 1 million tag team champions. Every time there was a heel with Albano, you knew they were going to get that belt. And they all deserved it, by the way, in that
Well
time
done, sir.
period. You know. Samoans. My God. The Samoans... I mean, do I have to explain this? You know the bloodline, you know the family line, and what their seed has carried all these decades. The Samoans were absolutely the best, right there with I think they were better than Fuji and Saito personally. But we're talking 2 great villain tag teams. My God, they were excellent.
I waver towards Fuji and Saito.
I get it,
but
they're more
Samoans were
cerebral,
great.
But the Samoans were just
Absolutely.
wow, what a great gimmick. I mean, Fuji and Saito also were great. They're both amazing, Can we? I guess you could mention the Moondogs.
That's like, don't
You gotta
pass the
mention
Moondogs. Do
You
not
gotta
pass the-
mention the great face tag team of the early '80s with Gurria and Martel.
Oh, absolutely.
Gurria and Martel were as face as they come. The fans loved them. The girls howled. They could both wrestle. In those days, they were considered absolutely great wrestlers, for what they did. They were fantastic. Rick Martel was a star.
Just a little shout out for Putski and Santana. They held the title for 173
Yes, they
days.
did.
That's
They
a
lost it to the
long
Samoans, I think,
time.
at the Spectrum
They
or
did. They
something
lost
like
it
that.
at the Philadelphia Spectrum at a house
Boy,
show.
I'm on fire right now.
They didn't make our top 10.
Okay.
But I would say probably the most, to me, I don't care, 81 to 89.
Yeah.
The most important tag team match in the
personal
history of tag team wrestling. The Soul Patrol, Rocky Johnson and Tony Atlas defeating the Wild Samoans.
That was
not just incredible for wrestling.
Yeah, that's one of the greatest tag team moments of the decade for WWF, period.
Absolutely.
Period.
And in all of pro wrestling.
Of course it was. And it was great.
And,
I was psyched.
I
I
actually
was
mentioned to
rooting
the Pharaoh that I thought maybe Atlas and
might get a sniff of the 10 greatest teams.
might get a sniff, but then Pharaoh said,
stop giving everything away.
All right.
Maybe they made it, maybe they didn't. Stay tuned, folks.
All right.
This is where tag team wrestling really takes off. You had Demolition and the Hart Foundation and the Rockers and Other teams came through too. The Brain Busters, you know, you had all these great teams. But to me, I guess I would say that the three best teams of the '80s that best defined and dominated it, you have to go with the Samoans. You got to go with Demolition, in my opinion. And the third one becomes tough for me. Oh boy, that is tough. I'm going to say Heart Foundation. Okay, I'll go with that.
I want to recognize a couple again. U.S. Express. Rotundo,
Absolutely.
Right?
My
Wyndham.
God, wasn't that Sheik and Volkov with them? I mean,
You know,
come on.
let's not forget about the Colossal Connection, dude. That was a
Okay.
pretty wicked. Like we talk about super
Sure,
teams, right?
sure.
That was like a super
Sure,
team.
yeah.
You know, back in the day.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Brain Busters, who I thought fell flat in the WWF
Right, but they were still
at the
great.
time.
I thought they were great.
Well, you thought they were great because of the NWA. You,
Yeah,
you
that's
didn't
true,
think they
too.
were great because
Yeah,
of WWF.
that's definitely more so than yes.
You know, the Nasty Boys,
The Nasty Boys are freaking
LOD.
Fantastic. LOD, of course, but they fall into the Brain Busters thing with
They
me.
fell
But
flat, right?
We'll explain that more when we get to the top 10 list, I guess.
Money Inc.,
Money Inc., they really are truly one of the greatest teams in the history of the company.
Strike Force,
Strike Force is probably in the top 20 all-time of the greatest teams in the history of the company.
Natural Disasters.
Of course. That's good.
All right, 1990s, my friend. So now you get into the 1990s. Wrestling starts to fall apart in the all around.
Yeah.
Right? Early 90s,
Yeah,
wrestling gets really slow.
By 1995, it's really starting to smell really bad. Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, well, the 90s was like we're saying, was a little bit of a lull until we got towards the Attitude Era and things started to explode again. But in the early 90s, of course, you still had the Rockers and LOD was there. And the Steiners came for. You can't call it a cup of coffee, can you? The Steiners weren't there for a cup of coffee.
No, they weren't. They were here for a while.
You're right. They actually had a full course meal, I guess. You know. My impressions of the early 90s with tag team wrestling seemed to fade away as I was fading away from. They were losing me with the Sergeant Slaughter Hogan program. They were starting to lose me already. So it's a little vague, but it really comes into clarity for me in the later 90s when you're talking about the Dudleys and Edge and Christian and the Hardy Boys and the New Age Outlaws and all these teams start to pop up, and then you had a huge scene going on. So the 90s was really a strange time anyway for wrestling. Wrestling took a dip and then had a huge comeback, and it almost reflects in the belts themselves.
We were talking about the Mega Powers.
Yeah.
Right? And Jimmy and I would.
Have we discussed the Mega
No,
Powers yet on the show?
No,
We've been
not on the
talking
show.
about it all week.
Right.
Yeah, go
so
ahead.
for my top 10 list, I kept on saying, I don't know, man. I feel like I got to put the Mega Powers there.
It's
And
like,
Jimmy was
no.
getting crazy about it.
Yeah.
But, you know,
They were
Jimmy's
an
like,
event.
they didn't win the tag team
No,
titles.
were
They
an
don't
event.
deserve.
They were put together to be broken apart to have WrestleMania 5. That's what they were there for. I don't look at them as a tag team.
But-
I looked at them as something Vince did to go to the storyline. Like you told me, they were only together for 4 months. They had one major pay-per-view with the SummerSlam thing or whatever it was, and they were done because they were destined to have a fight and go, I hate you, Hulk Hogan. That's what was supposed to happen with that.
But wouldn't Shawn
on
Michaels.
paper, though, I grant you, Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage, you'd be really hard-pressed to get me a better team.
New Age Outlaws.
There we go. There we go. That's one of the great all-time teams. And if you're not down with that, they've got 2 words for you.
I'm going to start with my list, which is pretty much the same as your list. A couple of things are shuffled here.
Yeah.
But I will, again,
This was hard.
I do.
This is really
I
hard.
do. If it was my personal list,
It's not our personal list.
but if it was my personal
Right.
list, the Mega Powers would be in the top 10.
Sure, I understand.
For sure.
I got you.
So
Wasn't easy.
my number 10 was the Hardy Boys.
Okay. Tell me why you put them at number
The
10.
reason I took the Hardy Boys at number 10 is they were high flyers, tag team specialists for sure. But I always felt that when the Hardy Boys wrestled anybody but Edge and Christian or the Dudley Boys, there was nothing special there.
Interesting.
I just never.
But
that,
you're still
that was my-
acknowledging them.
I have to acknowledge them because
Okay.
you know what? They were tag team innovators,
Absolutely. They were
right?
great.
They were tag team innovators.
I will
so
talk more about them if they pop up on my list, but I respect that, and I do believe they deserve a spot on the list. So that's a good job by you. My number 10, And this was one where I almost kept them off completely because I do resent the push that they've gotten, because I'm a Demolition fan and I resent the push that Vince McMahon gave them to purposely pass Demolition's reign because of the lawsuit that Demolition's been involved with on and off against Vince. So I'm going to obviously say at number 10, and I have to acknowledge it because it's wrong to not acknowledge it. They hold the record for the longest reign in 50 years of the tag titles. I'm talking about the New Day. To me, they are a faction, but this is what I was getting back to earlier, that Vince forced them into the equation. I have to acknowledge them. They were champions forever. They were champions longer than Demolition. They broke the 400 and whatever days it was, and they're the longest reigning champions now. They also, to be fair, along with the Usos, are the face of the tag team division for the last half a decade. So they have the longest reign, and they've been the face of the tag team division for many years now, and they deserve some respect. So even though I am not a fan, and I do believe Vince purposely had them break Demolition's record for whatever he's holding against Axe and Smash, the New Day is number 10.
So it's different times.
Yeah, and I have
all right.
to, I have
it's
to recognize
different
that
times.
Too.
It's about selling merchandise.
Oh, they sell a ton.
Right.
You know, a ton.
I agree with you. I had a problem with the New Day also, but I put them at number 9.
Okay. So you're in the ballpark.
You're number 9.
My number 9 is the New Age Outlaws. I believe that they were pretty much the face of the tag team division as far as the markability. They weren't necessarily the best wrestlers of the bunch that came out of the Attitude Era's tag team division, but they were the ones that were, everyone had a DX Suck It shirt. Everyone. I had it. I know I had it. And I know everybody just loved to go, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, D-Generation X proudly brings to you the, whatever, how many times it was, tag team champions of the world. Those guys were so freaking over. They were so over, and they held the belts like 6 times. They're to me, the marketable face of that entire era. So I do believe they deserve a spot on this list. They are the New Age Outlaws. You don't have to like them. You don't have to think that they can wrestle like other people or whatever. This was a great tag team. And
Next up, we both had the Bulldogs at number 8.
The British Bulldogs.
Personally,
now, you and I were going a little nuts.
Well,
it's funny that we wind up having them at the same spot, considering how much we argued
so,
on this.
But here's the thing. I think we argued on different ends.
Okay.
If you really look at the British Bulldogs in their tag team back of the baseball card,
right,
they held the belts for a very short time.
Okay.
They were a very small part of that tag team division.
They were a big part, but they didn't hold the belts as much as they probably should have.
Well, what I mean is, as a tag team, they were a very small part. What puts them in the top 10 is their influence on the industry and their style.
Absolutely.
Becoming I believe the first face tag team that Captain Lou Albano managed. Obviously Dynamite Kid was hurt. That contributed to the issue. But I literally almost left them off the list. But
I couldn't do that.
It was very difficult. It was hard for me not to put them on, not to put them on the list and to take them off the list.
Right.
So I said, you know what? I can't not recognize what they have done for the industry.
Absolutely, and to this day, they're still so respected and revered. It's just, I feel that they had to have a place in there regardless. You know, some people would be, what are you, crazy? They're the best. And I could see why you would think that. I mean, in the ring, technically, but that's not completely what this is about at all. If it was a technical contest, of course, they're probably in the top 3, you know. Who do we have at number 7, Mike?
So at number 7, I put Edge and Christian.
Interesting. That's what I have as well.
Exactly. Again, going back to the Intercontinental deal that we did, Edge, to me, is more of a singles guy.
Yeah.
So we said, hey, this guy was
champion.
a great Intercontinental champion. But when I think of Edge now, I think of him as world champion.
World champion.
Christian, I think, is Christian.
Tag team champion with Edge.
Exactly.
That's what I think of to this day, even though Christian's had his world titles and stuff, but I never got there with Christian. I did with Edge.
And I almost feel like Edge and Christian, the same I said about the Hardys, right? They were great with the Dudleys.
Right.
They were great with the Hardys.
Right, but
and
you
after
don't
that,
remember anything distinctive
nothing.
Otherwise. But you know what, though? You can't take that away from them. This was the magic of those 3 teams. And
Yeah.
they deserve to be given all the credit in the world, and that's why they're on this list. So, okay, it is what it is.
It is what it is.
Exactly. Who's at number 6?
Number 6, this is where we have a disparaging difference between ourselves, but
Right.
the Dudley Boys are my number 6.
I can't argue with them being on your list. Why do you place them there? Tell me what well, how did they make your list in the first place?
Well, again, I think of the 3 teams that they're recognized with: the Hardy Boys, Edge and Christian. The Dudley Boys are the best of those teams, and the Dudleys actually had other great matches in the WWE, WWF with other teams, which I felt the other 2 didn't.
Right.
So but then again, I could not put them higher than I put them.
Right.
And again, I can understand arguing the point, because if you really look at just overall tag team success,
right, Dudleys.
The Dudleys are probably. You'd be hard to argue that they were the greatest tag team.
Oh God, I love the Dudleys. To me are the Hanson brothers. From Slapshot. I
Sure.
mean, they're just in a wrestling ring. I love the Dudley Boys. Always have.
But your number 6.
My number 6 is the Hart Foundation. And it's funny, you were sitting here mentioning about how you look at Edge, you think world champion. Look at the Hart Foundation, you got Bret Hart. He's the world champion, you know what I mean? But there he is, as he should be. The Hart Foundation, forget it. They were absolutely great. I considered them more impactful than the British Bulldogs at the time. They were more over, I'll tell you that. That much I do remember. I thought that they were amazing, and boy, did they complement each other. They really did. You had the ultimate technician, the silent but deadly Bret Hart, and the beast, Neidhart, the loose cannon.
And number 5, the New Age Outlaws. So this is where I totally disagreed with your list. I felt you did not give them enough credit. They were.
I thought I did.
They were they're low on your list, right? They're 9.
Yeah, but they're on my list.
Oh yeah, of
There's
course.
50 years here with 5,000 teams, and they're in the top 10.
I felt that they were the team.
They were
in the hottest time of professional wrestling.
I agree.
And
but they had a lot of help.
Absolutely.
And that's where I don't. And the ones who were helping, I think, were superior. And that's some of them, or at least one of them.
That's a great point.
But we'll get to that.
That's a great point. Now you had, what did you have at number 5?
At number 5, I have the Hardy Boys, because again, this gets back to the Hardy Boys. To me, really represent a tag team. And yes, Jeff went on to be world champion and all this other stuff, but the Hardy Boys are, to me, a quintessential idea of a tag team. First of all, they're bros, okay? And that never hurts, that they're bros. Second of all, their ability in the ring is insane, and that always helps too. But the thing that I always loved the most about them is that although they went their separate ways sometimes, and although they had some individual successes, Matt had some success too. When they came back together at WrestleMania recently, when Vince brought them back, the house caved in. That was the affirmation of what I've always known. The Hardy Boys are legends. They're legends. And they didn't start out that way with me. When they started out those 2 skinny kids in plaid that were getting ragged all over the place. Do you remember their early days? How ragdoll they used to get?
Absolutely.
They really turned into a fine wine.
Number 4, I had the Wild Samoans.
Interesting. So do I. That's where I put the Samoans.
I think you can't. It's hard to argue that point.
Come on.
Were they the greatest wrestlers? No.
They didn't have to be.
Were they great on the mic? No.
They didn't have to talk.
Exactly.
They were just brutish. They just kill you. I thought that they were great. Every headbutt you see today either comes from Andre or the Samoans.
Yeah.
Nice.
The Valiants I have is number 3.
So do I. That's interesting. Yeah, the Valiants to me are the greatest team of the 70s. They were the first one with the longest reign. Demolition broke their record.
Even Luscious Johnny?
I can't really blame him for who he was friends with.
You're right.
Be nice, but he was.
Do you think he was really friends with that guy anyway?
Highly unlikely.
He probably was like, I hate this guy as much as we do. The Valiants, to me, I've told this story. Yeah. I was younger, much younger. And it's midnight, WOR. All I remember is you see these guys, and they have blonde hair, but I think they're women with no shirts on.
You thought they were girls.
Right? I'm like, what is this?
You thought they were girls.
And me and my sister are like, what is going on here? And then my father comes on and he goes, that's pro wrestling. And I'm like, what is that?
Yeah, what am I looking at?
What am I looking at?
Right.
And
blonde-haired girls with no shirts on. That's what you thought you were looking at.
All right, number 2 is very difficult for me because they are my favorite tag team of all time.
How dare you?
Demolition.
How?
I put it number 2.
Dare you? How
Th-
could
this
you?
I just
Interesting.
I
Okay, all right,
didn't
well,
have a choice.
You know what? Say nice things about the team we both love. Go ahead at number 2, Demolition, who we've had in studio and great
Demolition
guys.
were the perfect, and we had them in studio. Great people, like you said. Their music was killer.
Of course it was.
Boy, did I love Demolition, and so many great moments. You know, being a heel team, turning face.
That was great too.
Turning heel.
What about at the Rumble where they beat the hell out of each other?
I was going to say that.
It's one of the best moments
wow.
ever.
And again, when Andre comes in and they just go back to normal, whew.
Do you know what I remember the most, though? The first time they were over, they came out, and it was at the Garden. I do remember this. And
Go ahead.
They came out, and the music was playing, and they turned and they looked at the crowd, and they took off the veils. You know how they had their faces covered?
Yeah.
They ripped them off, and there was the face paint. And, dude, the place went nuts.
Absolutely.
And they
You had the Dudley Boys at number 2.
Yes, I did.
Tell me why.
I would have put them at number 1, but I'll save my number 1 from when I shortly get there. The Dudley Boys, to me, are, as I said before, the Hansons from Slapshot, but they're also so much more than that. They have beautiful chemistry. They always did. They could have great matches, like you said, with multiple different teams.
Yes.
Doesn't matter what style, the Dudleys will do it. The Dudleys were legitimately tough. You know, as they were coming up, there were tough teams that were testing them physically, and they were like, they'd go to the back and go, oh, crap, those guys give as good as they get.
Yeah.
You know, the Dudley Boys, to me, are tag team wrestling just in general. And what a great gimmick. You guys looking at them at home? They're brothers. It's hilarious, the fact that they made, oh, he's my brother. This is my brother, Devon. You know, it's just everything they did was great, and it was very Slapshot great.
It's funny how that goes, because I remember when they first came, I always liked the stuttering, you know, Bubba Ray Dudley.
That was great.
And, you know, I did, but then he went
That
away
was
from it.
great.
I guess he didn't want to do it anymore.
Right.
My number 1, again, not a fan of the team, but I don't think, it's very hard to argue this, the Hart Foundation.
Interesting.
They were innovative before innovation.
Okay.
They had their moves. They looked great together. They could wrestle with everyone. You had the power, and then you had the, you know, the artist in Bret Hart. Jim Neidhart was the power.
Yep. Yeah, as far as balance goes on this list of our, and we have them both on our list, that is the most balanced team on the list.
Again, the problem is Bret Hart
finesse
became
guy, a power guy.
a great intercontinental champion, a great world champion. So,
Right.
but again, the Hart Foundation. Listen, I remember the Hart Foundation as much as I hated them when Demolition became again another faction. Mm-hmm. Okay,
Right.
they were a
Crush.
faction.
Yeah, that was right.
When they had that SummerSlam match at the end when Demolition was being phased out, and LOD came out and helped the Hart Foundation win the belt, there was no way I thought the Hart Foundation was going to beat Demolition. I was like, they can't do this. I don't know, man. As shocking as it is to me, the Hart Foundation is the greatest WWE tag team champion.
Well, Ed Farrell's number 1, and I'm sure it won't be a surprise to too many people. I have Demolition. There's a reason why that record stood for around 30 years. That record stood, okay? It was their shoulders, whether it was merchandise back in those days or whether it was main event matches during the early days of WrestleMania. It was their shoulders that was placed upon, and boy, did they deliver.